So I wanted to talk a little bit about stranded colorwork knitting. I've already started this bonnet here. I'm on a row. That is a great example for me to be able to show you how I work when working with two colors. This row is an alternating red and white stitch, back and forth. How I like to work colorwork is one strand in each hand. So I'm throwing with this hand and I'm working in continental on this hand, which I believe is what they call picking. Some people like to work colorwork with both of the yarns in their left hand, and sometimes you can even take your background color, I'm sorry, not your background color, your contrasting color, and reposition it so that it's coming off the back of your finger, and this will keep this color underneath your background color, and it'll help it pop. Some people are purely English style knitters, so they will want both colors in their right hand. Sometimes I'll see people working one on their index and one on their middle finger. I can't get used to this, but whatever way is easiest for you and comes most natural, that's the way you should do it. There is no right or wrong way. I am comfortable mostly knitting like this. So what I like to do is just go back and forth. We're on a red stitch right now, so I will work a red, work a white, red, white, and I want to make a note about color in Fair Isle. There is going to be a dominant color, and you will notice it in your knitting, and if you Google search it, like Fair Isle color dominance, you can really get in depth in it. But pretty much what it comes down to is the yarn that is floating underneath is always going to be the dominant color. So what that means is, as you can see, my red yarn is underneath my white yarn. That's how it's being carried. So the red is going to pop. So if you are a continental knitter like me, or you knit Fair Isle one in each hand, the color that you want to be dominant needs to be held in your left hand. This is the background color. This is the contrasting color. It's going to be the dominant color. And you can almost even tell that the red stitches are a tad bit looser, just a tiny bit, but they are definitely more dominant than the white. So just keep that in mind when you are working Fair Isle. Say you were knitting an all red bonnet. If you were knitting an all red bonnet and you wanted white details, then you would be holding the red yarn in your right hand and the white yarn in your left hand, and that would help it pop up against that dark red background a lot better. Whereas if you were to hold it oppositely, the white stitches would sink down into the background and they just wouldn't be as prominent, and it just wouldn't look as nice. But like I said a minute ago, really it just comes down to preference, what you prefer and what works best for you. So let's see if I can give you a couple other examples of how this would work, even though it's not very easy for me. So take this red stitch and just give it a little twist, and that way you have one yarn coming off of the front and one yarn coming off of from the back. And how you would do this is grab this yarn, and then from underneath you would reach under your white yarn and grab that red yarn. Whoops, if I was in the stitch, like that, and then grab the white, and then go underneath, grab the red. This is much more challenging for me. The tension I just can't get right, and it slows me down. If you were to knit all English, let's try that really quick. If I were to be doing this, I would probably hold both strands in my over my index finger, and I would just scoot it between, so like one white, and then switch fingers, or switch yarns, one red, one white. But when you do this, you want to make sure that you always grab the yarn from the same spot. So grab the white yarn from the front, work a stitch. When you drop that one, you got to pick up the red yarn from the back, and that way it all stays consistent, and it's all about that yarn dominance. I could probably get used to this if I had to, but it's definitely more fumbly. And I'm back to the end. So there will be some rows in this pattern where you have to knit all of one color. And because this chart doesn't have an extra row of white, so for instance on this row, you work down in white. You do not work back down the other way in white. So therefore we have to carry this contrasting color with us because we're going to need to use it on the next row. So in order to trap this, because you certainly can't just knit across with white because your yarn would be left over on this side. So we have to trap it while we are knitting over. So how I do that, I'm going to get to a stitch that I want to trap it on, which is this one, and I need to trap this yarn. And what I mean by trap it is I need to secure it in the back of my work so that it's not just loosely hanging in the back. And whatever color this is, that is the color stitch that I want to trap it on, because it won't show through the front as much. So I'm at a red stitch right now, and I need to trap a red float. So if the strand that you're trapping is in your left hand, I'm a continental knitter, it might be different for an English knitter, all I have to do is simply pull my finger forward so that this yarn sits in front of my white yarn. I'm going to knit this stitch as usual, and then when I pull it through, you will see that on the back of the work, this red yarn is trapped behind this stitch that we just knit. I've trapped my floats about every fourth stitch, depending on the work and how long of a float I want in the back. So here we are again. I'm going to tilt my finger forward just a little bit so that the yarn is over my left needle, so just like that, and then knit that stitch as usual, pull it off, and we are trapping that yarn in the back. And when we look at the back of the work, this right here, that is what is called the float, because this yarn is just floating behind, and you can see where it's getting trapped. Here, 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 here. So say you needed to trap the yarn that's in your right hand over here. I don't need to do it on this row, but in order to show you, I'm going to pick a stitch, hopefully if it works out with the numbers, that is the same color as the yarn that I want to trap. Let me knit a couple in the red. Okay, so here we are. I want to trap it on this next stitch. what I need to do, this one is a little bit trickier. I have to take my yarn, wrap it around my needle as if I'm going to knit it, but I'm not really going to knit it. And then I take the strand that I'm actually knitting with, so the red one, also wrap it around. So now there's two colors wrapped around this needle. And now you take your white yarn and you unwrap it. And then you can complete knitting that stitch. And that secures the white in the back. Let's do that a couple more times. I take my white, wrap it around, wrap my working yarn around, and then unwrap my white and finish knitting. Let's do it one more time. White yarn around the needle, red yarn around the needle, unwrap your white yarn, and finish knitting the stitch. And then when we turn this around, you will see that the white yarn was getting trapped. Once I get to the end of my work, I typically have a couple, well, these are the two edge stitches, here and here, and then on this color chart that I'm working, which is color chart number 1, it has 3 white stitches on either edge of the work. And what I'm going to use these for is actually to secure my contrasting color, because if I just leave this yarn kind of hanging back here, go to my next row and then start to use it, it's going to pull on these stitches and it's going to create an opening that's kind of unsightly. So what I'll do, I'm at my 5 edge stitches here. I'm going to trap it the same way that I would if I were trapping a float. So I'm just going to trap this red float right here. I'm at the 2 end stitches, so I'm going to slip these 2 stitches purlwise. Then when I flip my work and begin to work, here's where this yarn was trapped. When I go to work my color work, I'm not going to create that hole, or the red isn't going to show through as much on the inside. Okay, so I am getting ready to work another colorwork row. This is colorwork chart 1 once again. I'm on the wrong side, and some of you may never have worked colorwork on the wrong side, and it's pretty much the same, just a little different looking anyways. So I'm going to purl my first 2 stitches. Oops. It's very hard to knit looking through a camera. Okay, my first 3 stitches are white, so I'm going to need to trap a float at some point. I think I'm going to do it here. So we are trapping the red yarn. So for this, I just lay my yarn over top of my left needle, take the yarn I'm working with, knit the stitch as you normally would. That's the easy one, and it gets trapped right here. So 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to knit 1 red, 3 white, 1 red. That's going to be the repeat for this row. 3 white, 1 red. And as you can see, the red yarn is just kind of hanging out there. I'm not pulling it too tight. If I pull it too tight in between where I'm knitting, this strand will be very tight and it's going to bunch up the knitting and it's going to look not so nice on the right side. So I'm just letting it loosely hang out in the back until I come to another red stitch.